I guess the first thing I have to do is to welcome everybody and to apologize because apparently you were able to hear our preparations, which I don't know how that happened, but I'm also not a very tech-affine person. So welcome everybody to today's session. My name is Katrin. I'm working for the Global Resilient Cities Network, and I have the pleasure to welcome you to this amazing session organized by our great partners, Ocean Conservancy. Just quickly on what's going to happen today. So you will listen to some amazing presentations from our colleagues. This is actually the first session of our second week in a digital preparation forum for our joint urban ocean program. It's the first session which we are opening up beyond the program cities, and I really hope that this is an exciting experience for you. We started last week with talking about resilience in the ocean and waste management, and we are going to focus this week on mainly ocean plastic and anything that is related to that. And yeah, as I said, I really hope that you're going to enjoy that session. We have almost 100 people registered. I hope you are aware that you're not allowed to drop off. So even if you get bored, you have to stay on because we need the figures. I think I would like to say thank you to the Ocean Conservancy and my three colleagues, Doug, Chever, and Carrie, who are with us today. And just some quick housekeeping. The session will be recorded. We are going to share the recording afterward. You can ask questions via the Q&A. We will not actively monitor the chat, but we will come back to any questions which we are not able to address today with an email. And please make sure that you also register for the second session tomorrow morning with Dr. Chelsea Rutschman on science-based solutions, micro and macro plastics in municipal waterways. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to hand over to Doug Kress, Vice President of Ocean Conservancy. Doug, it's your floor.
Thank you so much, Katrin. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Building Smart Policies in Your City, a webinar produced by Ocean Conservancy and its urban ocean partners, the Global Resilient Cities Network and the Circular Initiative. My name, as Katrin said, is Doug Kress, and I'm the Vice President, Conservation for Ocean Conservancy. I'm pleased to welcome you to a presentation on some of the most promising approaches towards creating stronger waste management systems in urban areas. Nearly 70% of the world's population is projected to live in urban areas by 2050, and these population centers are critical in the fight to keep plastics out of our ocean. As it is, 11 million metric tons of plastic debris enters the ocean each year, and the threats to biodiversity, not to mention public health or fisheries, tourism, and other essential sectors, are considerable. City leaders are already tackling issues that impact the ocean, like water quality and waste management, recognizing that it is essential we build stronger and more resilient and more sustainable communities in the face of climate change and other imminent threats. That is why Ocean Conservancy and its partners launched the Urban Ocean Initiative more than a year ago, creating a platform for city governments, community leaders, scientists, academics, and the private sector to connect with one another to develop and share and scale solutions to the ocean plastics crisis while progressing the broader urban development priorities. I oversee the Trash-Free Seas program at Ocean Conservancy, and it's my honor to be able to introduce one of my colleagues to lead this webinar discussion tonight. Chever Voltmer is the director for Ocean Conservancy's Plastics Initiative, and she manages a broad portfolio of programs that address plastic waste issues around the world. Chever is one of the lead editors of the Ocean Conservancy's Plastics Policy Playbook that was published in 2019, an in-depth guide to some of the most impactful public and private sector interventions available to tackle the plastic pollution crisis in parts of the world most affected by it, and a document she will reference in this webinar tonight. Prior to joining Ocean Conservancy in 2018, Chever worked at the Office of Ocean and Polar Affairs at the U.S. Department of State and oversaw U.S. engagement on the marine debris issue at the United Nations, G7, G20, APEC, ASEAN, and other international fora. Chever's foreign service also included postings to Poland, Guyana, Russia, Ecuador, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Ukraine, and Estonia, and she spent a year as the Director for Central America and the Caribbean Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. Chever holds undergraduate degrees in economics and Russian studies and holds a master's degree from the National War College. Let's just say she's really smart, where she was a distinguished graduate. It's my honor to present to you tonight, Chever Voltmer.
Good evening. It's a sultry evening in Washington, D.C., and I've had the pleasure to meet some of you already, and I look forward someday, hopefully, to meeting the rest of you in person. If possible, I'd like to start with a film. I think Sarab is going to help me cue that up, so let's give that technology a try and see if it works.
Dominating every corner of the Great Sea, the ocean's newest inhabitants are making their permanent mark on life below water. The creatures in this fascinating species do not have brains, teeth, or even simple nervous systems. But miraculously, they can travel for hundreds of miles and live to be over 1,000 years old. Plastics. Although they look noticeably different from the other sea-dwelling animals, they're doing their best to fit in. Some of them dance. Some of them play. They form bonds. They hunt. Some of them are even known to fall in love. And so we turn to the smallest of the species, microplastics. They might look harmless, but these tiny terrors will go on to kill over 1 million fish every single year. Not bad for a predator with no teeth. With their impenetrable bodies, alluring theatrics, and unwavering perseverance, the plastic species is quickly becoming a threat to life below water. Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And tonight, I really want to take you on a journey about how we got to where we are today. The conversation on cities really started in earnest when a small but mighty team from Ocean Conservancy attended 100 Resilient Cities Global City Summit in Rotterdam last year. As an ocean conservation organization, we know a lot about the ocean. We didn't know a lot about cities and their challenges. We suspected that cities are key to addressing some of the ocean's most pressing problems. And we wondered, would it be possible to build a coalition to co-create solutions to ocean plastic that would be good for both people and the planet? We were really inspired by what we saw and heard in Rotterdam. It's important to acknowledge that at the top of this presentation, because the dedication that we saw from so many of the cities and so many of the people that we met in Rotterdam to building resilient, inclusive, holistic, urban solutions to some of the biggest and most pressing problems of today's world really motivated us to keep pushing through everything that has happened since last summer. That includes 100 Resilient Cities transition to the Global Resilient Cities Network, and of course the global pandemic. So while this feels like the beginning in some ways, I just want to acknowledge the tremendous work that has been done by so many people to get us where we are here today. On the GRCN team, from the Circulate Initiative, and from my own team, as well as sort of thanking and recognizing our funders and our supporters. So who are we? Ocean Conservancy has been around for almost 50 years. We're based in the United States, but we work with a wide range of partners around the world on various conservation issues, including ocean plastic, which is what we want to talk about today. If you've heard of us before, you probably know us for this, the International Coastal Cleanup, or ICC. This is the world's largest beach cleanup effort. This year will be the International Coastal Cleanup's 35th anniversary, and we are determined, pandemic or no, to find a way to help our many committed volunteers and partners continue their fantastic work around the world. And you can see on the screen in front of you some of the statistics for what we've accomplished with the International Coastal Cleanup. But it's not just about picking up trash from the beaches. We are a science-based organization, and everything we do is driven by data and driven by research. And this extends to the International Coastal Cleanup. Our volunteers log every item they collect using either sort of old-fashioned paper data cards or our app called CleanSwell. And this data is in turn fed into the Ocean Trash Index, which is the world's largest marine debris database. And this is really important because it helps us identify trends that can inform policy. So we publish a report every year after the cleanup that includes a lot of information, including the top 10 list of what our volunteers find around the world. And every year for more than 30 years, cigarette butts, which contain plastic filters, have been at the top of the list of items we collect all around the world during the cleanup. And coastal cities have used this data to justify things like installing cigarette receptacles or even implementing smoking restrictions on beaches. It's important to note that since 2017, all of our top 10 items have been plastic. And that includes things that you might expect like bags, straws, food wrappers, and things of that nature. The International Coastal Cleanup is a really important part of our work. It has an immediate impact. It builds our knowledge of the issue. It's a really important educational tool, and it really helps galvanize action. We are told over and over again that people who come out to clean up beaches are shocked by what they see, and that can prompt them to take action, changing their habits or advocating for other change. But one thing we've come to understand over time is that cleanups alone are not enough to solve the problem of ocean plastic. In 2018, Ocean Conservancy and our partners mobilized more than 1 million volunteers to remove more than 23 million pounds of trash from beaches and waterways in a single day. This was a major milestone and a huge success of which we are very proud. But we would have to stage an event of that magnitude every day for more than 2 years just to break even with what scientists estimate is going into the ocean annually. So cleanups alone are not enough. So about 10 years ago, we convened a group of leading researchers from around the world to establish a baseline to try to understand what's going into the ocean, from where, and what are the sources, fate, and impacts of plastic on our ocean. So this is the resulting study. It was published in the journal Science in 2015. It was the first attempt to estimate how much trash is going into the ocean, and that is a number that you may have heard. 8 million metric tons of plastic leaking into the ocean from land every year, due primarily to mismanaged waste. And that is waste that was either never collected in the first place or escaped after being collected and ended up in the ocean. That study also broke down those numbers by country and found that more than half of the plastics entering the ocean come from 5 rapidly developing countries in Asia. That's China, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and the Philippines. And the reason for this is that economic growth has generally outstripped the ability to manage the accompanying waste.
Just a minute. We can't see your slides. So you
can't see them?
Yeah, we can't see them.
Hang on. Should be sharing. It says it's sharing. Let me try again. Hang on, I'll try again.
Or just share the PDF with me or Nini and we can share it. Sorry, didn't want it to cut you in your flow.
No, I'm going to send it to you right now, Sarab. I'm sorry for that.
And just a quick reminder to everybody else, could you please move from the chat into the Q&A with the questions you post? That would be really nice. Thank you so much.
Sarab, did you get that?
Just give me a minute.
So it should be on slide 8.
Okay, just you emailed me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's coming. I think you just keep on with your talking point. Once I'm there, I will just share.
So I'm going to try again just in case. Let me pull this up again. Share screen. Got it?
Not yet. I think it was a big presentation.
Is it working now? I've just redone it, rebooted it. It says you are screen sharing.
Yeah, it's working. Go on. It's working.
Okay. And let me just fix the presentation mode. Is that working? Just double checking.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, so this was a rough first attempt to quantify the magnitude of the problem, but it's important to note that the data from that is from 2010 and is definitely outdated by now. And in fact, there is a study that will be released shortly that raises that estimate to 11 million metric tons a year. The study also did not capture waste shipped from developed countries like the United States to developing countries. And new work is underway to drill down on that question and is likely to show that this is a truly global problem that developed countries contribute to significantly. So in 2012, Ocean Conservancy launched the Trash Free Seas Alliance. This is bringing together 30+ leaders from business, conservation, and academia to create a platform for pragmatic and real-world collaboration to measurably reduce ocean trash. And our thinking was that whatever your business, we can all agree that trash does not belong in the ocean. So working together, we hope to leverage the knowledge and the innovation of the private sector to solve this problem. Our first major project was this report, Stemming the Tide, which was released in 2015, shortly after the Jambet paper was published. And it showed that 75% of the plastic waste in the ocean was never collected to begin with. And the remainder leaks out of waste management systems after collection because of things like dump sites located too closely to the ocean. And we also found that the plastics with the lowest value, that's things that are not easily recyclable or that are very light, like food wrappers or plastic film, are the things that are most likely to end up in the ocean. We followed this up in 2017 to understand the why. Why is this the case? As cities working on the front lines of waste management, this will not be news to you, but one of our principal findings was that waste management systems cost more to operate than they generate in return. This is especially true in developing countries, where informal waste collectors often capture the highest value materials, and that where government funding cannot cover the costs. This report sort of demonstrated the need to improve the economics of waste collection in the places where waste is most likely to leak into the ocean. And to do that, we need to sort of change the math. So we identified a number of possible ways to do that. And again, none of these are likely to be news for municipal practitioners who deal with this issue every day. But one example is that sorting waste at the household level can go a long way in lowering costs by avoiding cross-contamination of wet and dry waste. The report also showed how important scale is to reducing costs and highlighted the need for investment to scale. And the dilemma is that while investment is needed to scale, investment is often hard to attract because these systems operate at a net cost. So this is a picture of my former colleague, Susan Rufo, who now heads the Circulate initiative. And Ocean Conservancy, together with our Trash Free Seas Alliance partners, set out to try to change that math. So in October 2017, Ocean Conservancy and a number of our corporate partners announced our commitment to creating a financing vehicle to fund capital investments needed to keep trash out of the ocean. And the following year, with our partners, we launched Circulate Capital, which is a first of its kind, impact-focused investment fund that finances waste management and recycling ventures in South and Southeast Asia. The goal was to create a pipeline of investable projects and to start building markets. We followed that up in 2018. We were really proud to announce that we had collectively raised more than 100 million for Circulate Capital's Ocean Fund, and the first investments from this fund have already been awarded. A few months later, the U.S. Agency for International Development announced that it was going to support our work by providing a $35 million credit guarantee to provide a 50% guarantee, loan portfolio guarantee, through the Development Credit Agency to further de-risk and incentivize investment in the region. So one of the things we realized early on is that there is no single solution to this problem. And again, this will not surprise any of you, but what works in Rotterdam may not work in Samarang. But we did see value in seeking a better understanding of the range of possible solutions and their potential impact. So we undertook the Plastics Policy Playbook to really do a deeper dive on that. And while the research focused on the 5 highest leakage geographies, we believe it has broader applicability. And we started by basically trying to gather every measure we could find that was being implemented everywhere to tackle this problem. And we started with what I would call a very long list of every possible measure that included more than 180 different options. And then we sort of looked at them and combined them and vetted them, consolidated that initial list down to 43 distinct public and private sector measures. Just to give you a flavor of what that looked like, it ran the gamut of everything from fine illegal dumping to conduct awareness and behavior change campaigns to ban certain kinds of plastic. So then we took those measures and we evaluated and scored them against 2 criteria. The first was impact. What is the potential for this measure to reduce ocean plastics? And what are its other economic, environmental, and social impacts? Some of the factors we considered were things like whether a measure would increase greenhouse gas emissions and whether it would positively or negatively impact human health. The second major criteria we examined was ease of implementation. Some things are relatively easy to do, but have a modest impact. Other things are harder, but can have a much greater impact over time. And then we looked at each of those measures in each of the 5 focus countries to sort of get an idea of how applicable they were in various geographies. Did a measure complement existing policy or did it complicate it? Then came the most fun part for me. We took that list of 43 measures out to the field and presented it to a wide range of government representatives, private sector leaders, entrepreneurs, and NGOs in 3 countries, Indonesia, the Philippines, and India. We didn't tell the local experts in those countries how we scored each individual measure, but we asked them both to conduct their own evaluation and also to tell us what we'd missed or gotten wrong. And we heard a lot, but in the process of telling us what we got wrong, we also heard a lot about what we got right. And based on that feedback, we further adjusted and refined our measures and ended up with a short list of 24 public and private measures. Then we took those measures And we tried to model the potential impact of some of the most promising combinations to understand how they might work together. So in addition to the measures themselves, we also identified some important prerequisites for success. And I'm sure these will resonate with this audience. Most of them are fairly straightforward. So for example, it doesn't help to increase waste collection without also addressing where that waste will go. So you need to combine measures and address multiple points in the value chain. Engaging and including the informal sector is really also key in many geographies. Informal sector actors have real expertise and can serve as the foundation for strong waste management systems. I'm sure that anyone who works in local government understands the importance of consumer awareness and behavior change. You can implement all kinds of great policies, but if the public doesn't know about them, understand them, or support them, your odds of success will be very low. Inspiring political will was really a big part of our incentive to build the Urban Ocean Partnership, because we really felt like the cities that are in this network are already demonstrating political will, both by joining the Global Resilient Cities Network and by also participating in either the community of practice or as one of our first cohort cities. And then finally, no surprises here, nothing works if it's not enforced, and transparency and accountability are really key for success. So just to make these measures easier to understand, we sort of group them into 4 categories. So we'll start with the first one, which is financing the collection. All right, my screen has frozen. Oh, there we go. Okay, here we go. So in most places, responsibility for picking up trash falls on local governments. Lack of ability to fund waste management systems or finance waste management infrastructure has real-world ramifications. To give you an example, in the Philippines, only 18% of the country's 42,000 barangays, which are sub-municipal units of government, are served by formal materials recovery facilities. Lack of money also hampers maintenance. In Indonesia, only 12% of waste management facilities are fully functioning. And across the 5 countries that we examined in depth, we found a funding gap for plastic waste collection of $28 to $40 per ton. What's really interesting about that finding is that although it's significant, our corporate partners did not find that figure insurmountable, which gives me hope that we can solve this problem if we work together. So how might that be done? We looked at a lot of different measures, but one rose to the top, and that was extended producer responsibility. That's really a catch-all phrase for a wide range of measures that in one way or another transfer responsibility, either physically or financially, for the collection, treatment, and disposal of products after the consumer is done with them. And you can do this in a lot of different ways. Packaging material fees, for example, assess fees on producers based on the amount of packaging they put into the market. Deposit return schemes, which operate in many markets, charge consumers an additional fee on a product, so a bottle, when they buy it, and then they get that back when they return it. Another option, which is less used but under active consideration in a lot of places right now, is plastic credits, where producers offset their plastic footprint by buying credits to mitigate the cost of disposal. One important factor to mention with all EPR mechanisms and fees is that it's particularly important for local governments, and that's particularly important for local governments, is to ensure that any of those fees that are collected are used exclusively for the purposes intended rather than directed to general budget revenues. And that's particularly true if they're collected at the national level, which I'm sure local governments can understand why. Another common mechanism that's used more in developed rather than developing countries is what's known as pay-as-you-throw. That's where you charge businesses or households fees based on either a flat fee or the amount of waste they generate. This can be a challenging option in a lot of developing economies where household incomes can be modest. Blended finance, which pools some mixture of public, private, and philanthropic capital, can be an option as well for certain kinds of challenges, and that's along the lines of what we're doing with Circulate Capital. And then another way to sort of improve the financing piece is just improving operational efficiency. So just to give you one example of that is from the Philippines. And this is the city of Tacloban. They have 242,000 people. And in 2013, they were hit by a cyclone that damaged their waste management infrastructure. And the government there really struggled after the cyclone to provide waste collection services. Its landfill was very close to capacity, even though it was only providing service to 30% of the city. So an NGO called the Mother Earth Foundation introduced a new waste management system in 2017. And the centerpiece of that really was about decentralizing collection and improving segregation of waste into organic, recyclable, and residual waste. And even though that pilot only covered 40% of the city, Tacloban succeeded in reducing its landfill-bound waste by 31% and saved $413,000 of its annual $1.5 million waste management budget, which allowed it to expand its service to all households in the city without increasing costs. And I visited several of these zero waste communities in the Philippines and was very impressed by how quickly and how fast they were able to implement this model, and cutting costs by, in some cases, up to 80%. So there are lots of interesting and impressive models out there on the local level. So we modeled, so this is the result of our financial modeling of these measures, and the variances are sort of due to local conditions. Pay as you throw depends on what level of fees you charge, for example, but provides some useful data on likely impacts. So we really wanted to look at the full spectrum of possible measures to keep trash out of the ocean, and bans are an increasingly popular option, especially at the local government level. So we wanted to look at what happens if you eliminate some of the problematic and unnecessary single-use plastics from the waste stream. So we defined those with this list. And this list tracks very closely with the European Union definition and also with that which was developed by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is in turn partly based on our own list, Ocean Conservancy's list of the top 10 items found during beach cleanups that we discussed earlier. So we looked at sort of different ways of tackling these problems. In some places, jurisdictions have implemented straight up bans on the manufacturing, distribution, or import of some of these products. And by removing these problematic products and packaging from the waste stream, bans can eliminate the need to collect some of these low value items and lower overall collection costs. So one good example of that is that in 2019, the Bali provincial government rolled out a regulation to ban plastic bags, straws, and foam packaging. And the ban was supported by Indonesia's Supreme Court, which ruled against a challenge by the Indonesian Recyclers Association, so paving the way for other local governments to enforce bans in their regions. Another sort of similar but more limited measure is to ban primary microplastics. These are small plastic fragments or particles of less than 5 millimeters in size, and they're often used in things like cosmetic products and toiletries. And while this is generally easier to implement and enforce, it doesn't address the issue of macroplastic pollution. But it's important because microplastics are virtually impossible to remove from the waste stream once they're in there. And many countries have either already targeted these plastics or plan to in the near future. We also looked at taxes and fees, things like bag fees. That's in my own local jurisdiction, we charge a fee for plastic bags. This measure can be effective and can reduce the demand for certain kinds of single-use plastics, but it does put a heavy burden on the consumer, and it has been difficult to enforce in a number of developing countries. There's also the option of removing non-recyclable plastics from packaging. I'll give you one recent example that I just heard about. The pasta company Barilla, which is very well known, an Italian company, is taking out the little plastic window in its pasta boxes and is going to be making its pasta boxes entirely out of paper now, which will eliminate this problematic material in the recycling stream. This can make recycling more efficient. It can simplify collection and segregation and processing. And then finally, in recent years, there's been a lot of interest in alternative materials that are biodegradable or compostable, or switching materials from, say, plastic to aluminum in the case of beverage bottles. This one is complicated, and the devil's really in the details, because while aluminum is more easily recycled, it may also have a higher carbon footprint to produce, to transport, and to recycle. So something that needs to be thought through carefully before implemented. And then there's also the issue of what does compostable really mean? And that's a whole separate discussion, but to simplify, compostable plastics may only be compostable under certain conditions. So these are things that need to be sort of thought through very carefully before implemented. In this case, we modeled 2 clusters of measures. And while this 3% seems like a modest contribution, for us, this is an important number to consider, and this is an important measure to consider, because if you ban a problematic plastic, you keep it out of the ocean. So we still think this is an important one to think about. So designing for circularity, I recognize that this one's a really hard one to think about at the local level, but it's really important, particularly in the medium and the long term. And the reason for this is that according to research that's been done by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, a fellow NGO, about 30% of plastic packaging by weight cannot be recycled without fundamental redesign. And only 20% of it is economically suitable for reuse. So this makes it really hard to get value out of some of this plastic. And I'm sure that those of you who manage local recycling systems are already well aware of which plastics those are. There are a lot of ways to improve recyclability and minimize the overall environmental footprint of the products and the packaging that you use. That could mean, for example, setting limits on difficult to recycle coloring or labeling practices, or difficult to recycle shapes and sizes. Sachets and food wrappers are notoriously difficult, for example, to recycle. This can, in theory, be done voluntarily by the private sector if they are willing to collaborate and agree to phase out some of these materials. One really interesting example comes from Japan, where beverage producers there agreed to eliminate colored plastic bottles, which are much harder to recycle. And so by agreeing collectively to only use clear plastic, they significantly improve the value or recyclability of these bottles. But in other markets, this could require government regulation. We also looked at recycled content standards, which basically means that you require a certain level of recycled material to be used in products and or packaging. This can increase the demand for recycling and those materials and improve collection rates. And it can also lower the cost of recycled plastic, which can help close that gap in cost between virgin and recycled plastics. So lastly, we also looked at refillable packaging, which is, designing packaging so that it can be reused through a reuse system. This, of course, reduces reliance on virgin plastics. It also has challenges. Reverse logistics, cleanup, refurbishing, safety and hygiene are all things that have to be considered. But it can be done, and it is being done successfully in a number of markets. And one example that will be familiar to our Indonesian participants on this call is from the water brand Aqua, which is owned by Danone in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, Danone has implemented this circular packaging system for its 19-liter water bottle. And it has been a huge success. Since 1983, they have delivered close to 70% of their water by volume across all of Indonesia, including remote islands like the Gili Islands, through this system. And by using a strong reverse logistics system, the bottle is collected, cleaned, refilled, and redelivered, and can be used, each bottle can be used 20 to 40 times during its life cycle. And then when it reaches the end of its life cycle, it's crushed and recycled into new 19-liter bottles. And as of today, each bottle in the Aqua system generally has about 40 to 60% recycled content. So this model is possible to implement, although it does require some important things to be in place. So when we modeled this, these are the numbers that we came out with, and Recycling content standards scored very high overall on all of the measures. And while some of these measures take time to implement and require strong private sector participation, we think they're really important because they start to bring us to a more circular system, which is ultimately more sustainable and more resilient. So on to the last theme, which is developing treatment and recycling markets. Current recycling capacity in many countries is low. In Indonesia, for example, it is only 13% of the total plastic consumption. And there are a lot of small and registered businesses, which makes it hard to scale. That sounds low, but frankly, it's still better than the global average, and it's better than our average in the United States, which is about 9%. So how do you do that? This really, in many cases, requires participation by the government to provide financial incentives. There are a number of ways to do this. It could be tax incentives, tax deductions, credits, low interest loans, to stimulate growth in the industry. The same can be done for processing systems for low value plastics. And then there's also the idea of repurposing low value plastic waste into more durable products like construction materials, railroad ties, durable furniture. And the other thing that governments can really do in this case is preferential procurement, which mandates public sector organizations to prioritize recycled and repurposed plastics for their own procurement purposes. And so we have seen some creative implementation of this. This is an example from the Philippines, and I think it's interesting because it is coming from a city. There's a company there, this Envirotech Waste Recycling, and they take difficult to recycle plastics, and that's really some of the hardest stuff, multi-layered plastic, films, and sachets. They convert that into chairs, tables, park benches, and other kinds of furniture. And they are able to use 90% of that chair you see there is made with this low value plastic. The remaining 10% comes from higher value plastic. And they work in partnership with their local municipality, and they provide the land and the factory equipment, while Envirotech provides the technology, the operations, and the service, and then the municipality gets the production. So they are able to use it for their parks and for their offices and for other things. So on the opposite end of incentivizing the recycling industry, there's also instead of the carrot, there's also the stick. You can tax virgin materials at the resin level, the packaging level, the brand owner level. And this can, disincentivize the production of certain kinds of plastic and also shrink the gap between virgin and recycled plastics. And lastly, one way to sort of shore up the industry is through private sector investment in R&D. And getting that investment can be a challenge because the returns are low unless there are other changes to the system. So in modeling those measures, we found that we could bridge the value chain financing gap by up to 29% by implementing some of these. And preferential procurement on its own could help lower that gap by 18%. So that's a summary of our key findings. And what is important to highlight for this audience, which probably already came through, is that municipalities can't do this alone. Success will require action not just by local government, but also by national governments, by the private sector, innovators, NGOs, and others. And so part of what we're really trying to do with Urban Ocean is to connect all those stakeholders with each other. We at Ocean Conservancy are really seeking to understand cities' needs, their challenges, and also their opportunities to help contribute to solutions. We want to leverage our access to international and local policy makers, as well as the private sector, financial institutions, entrepreneurs, and other NGOs to bring city voices into this conversation and to help shape policy that actually works on the ground where cities have to operate. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Chever. That was a wonderful presentation. My name is Carrie Browder, and I'm the city's project director with Ocean Conservancy. I'll actually be posing the first question to Doug and then the rest to you, Chever. Doug, a question from the audience is, does the ICC partner with any local organizations in different countries?
Thank you so much, Carrie, and thank you very much, Chever, for that fantastic presentation. I've heard pieces of this before, but it's always fascinating to hear this work. The ICC is actually celebrating its 35th anniversary this year, and the International Coastal Cleanup has done a tremendous job of not just dealing with and addressing the marine debris in the waterways and the oceans, but cataloging it. Chever mentioned the Clean Swell app. We're understanding exactly what is in the trash that's going into the oceans now. Currently, over 130 global coordinators around the world make up the ICC every single year, and it's celebrated normally in September of each year. We're getting ready for it in next month. But last year, over 21 million pounds of trash were collected through the ICC program, and that was the result of over 1 million people helping out to clean the waterways, the beaches, and other areas of the marine debris. It's become such an issue, but we are getting our heads around now what it comprises, the plastic crisis.
I would just add that we rely really heavily on a strong network of volunteers and coordinators around the world. We have some incredible partners that we're building our relationships with, including in all of the countries that we'll be working with in Urban Ocean.
Thank you to you both. Next question for you, Chever. The European Union imposes a plastic tax starting January 2021 to support the weakened economies due to Corona of Portugal, Italy, and Greece. Could an effort like this maybe be duplicated in Asia, Africa, Australia, or the US?
Yes, I mean, taxes are a way to raise revenue to pay for services in every jurisdiction. I think the appetite and the political reality of imposing taxes varies greatly by country and by political system, but certainly that is a very common default in developed countries. Our findings from our research are that a lot of creative solutions are coming out of the rest of the world that also can help solve this problem. But yes, taxes are definitely an option.
Thank you. We actually have a similar question along those lines. During the pandemic, there's an inclination to use more single-use plastics daily to avoid direct contact. How do we deal with this problem?
You know, it's my job to keep plastics out of the ocean, and it's what I spend all my time on and what I think about every day. That said, the first priority has to be preservation of life and safety for people. I think no matter who you are or where you live, saving lives and protecting health during this pandemic is the single most important thing. There are some misconceptions about plastic around the pandemic. So for example, many jurisdictions have rescinded their plastic bag bans or the ability of consumers to bring in their own bags. But the research shows that the virus actually lives longer on plastic than other surfaces. So I think part of what we need to do is keep people safe in the short term, and then think about how we're going to use the new reality of this pandemic to fundamentally change how we manage our systems over time.
If I could add to that though, Chever, everything you said is absolutely true. Human life and human health and the preservation of the societies is absolutely crucial. But we need to get our heads around the scale of the issue of PPE coming forward. 129 billion face masks are being used every single month and 65 billion gloves being used every single month. Some of that's going to wind up in the waste stream, and there's just no way around that. We are going to have to be dealing with a scale of plastic debris that we've never seen before, probably.
Thank you both. Another question has to do with the drastic drop in oil prices and the cost of virgin plastics, which, as you know, is now cheaper than recycled plastic. How can we de-link the price of oil from plastics to support the financial viability of recycling? And what market-based and legislative measures would you suggest to address this problem?
It's funny, I actually think that's the hardest nut to crack of all, because just fundamentally reusing a product is more expensive right now. Particularly, it's always been more expensive, but now with the drop in virgin oil prices, that gap is even higher. And how to equalize that? There are some things that can be done. So just to give you a couple of examples, in many jurisdictions that have a value-added tax, for example, recycled materials have more value added because they're reused. So providing exemptions or eliminations, VAT exemptions, can help address part of that gap. Another is recycled content standards. If you require products to include a certain amount of recycled content, then you start to get at that question of creating value and closing that price gap. And then the rest of it, to some extent, has to be legislated so that you're required to recycle. Recycling on its own seldom makes the economic case. So you have to build the legislative framework, you have to build the infrastructure, and you have to build the understanding and knowledge and support of consumers, governments, and companies to make it work.
Thank you very much, Chever. One other question that we received in advance was, why doesn't the playbook have any specific recommendations?
Thank you. That was a deliberate decision. So our understanding is that, you know, there's no silver bullet to solve the problem of marine debris, and that different solutions are going to work in different places. And so our goal with this exercise was not to tell people what to do, but to help them make informed decisions so that they can solve the problems in their own jurisdictions in the way that makes the most sense for them. So to give you an example, you know, extended producer responsibility scores very highly on these measures, but there may be jurisdictions or places where, for a variety of reasons, that's not going to happen in the short term. So what else could happen in the short term? How can you assemble a portfolio of actions that get you where you need to be? And so our goal was really to help cities and other actors figure this out for themselves, and to provide them with some robust analytics to guide those decisions rather than just telling them what to do.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions, so we'll try to be fairly quick. What is your perspective on having a plastic credit? And I don't have more information about the specifics, but in general.
That's a hot topic right now. There are a number of initiatives going on relating to plastic credits. We are engaged in some of those conversations. I think they're a challenge to implement, and I think there's not proof yet that they'll work. Theoretically, as an economist, I think they're a great idea, but making them work in practice is going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging to make sure, for example, that if you buy a plastic credit, you're undertaking the sort of measures that you're supposed to take to mitigate those issues. So managing those markets and putting the appropriate framework in place so that they work and that they accomplish the goals they need to accomplish has not yet been demonstrated. So that's a work in progress very much, but a hot topic right now.
Thank you. And then also there is a lot of low value plastic that often gets mixed with organic waste. What do you recommend for dealing with this issue?
Really, this is an area where I think municipalities can really make some progress, and we have seen that in some of the places that we visited around the world, and that really comes back to segregation at source. Just as simple as segregating organic and inorganic at source can really make a difference in the economics of waste collection. What we found, for example, in some of the zero waste communities we visited in the Philippines, these are not wealthy communities. They don't have a lot of space. They don't have room for the 17 bins you might have in Japan, but they could, organic and inorganic is simple enough that pretty much anyone can figure that out. And so they would do that first level segregation at the household, and then the collectors would come and do a second level of segregation, pulling out the more valuable materials and then the residual. And that alone really helped improve recycling in those jurisdictions.
Thank you. And then to end it off for the 2 of you, what would you consider 2 of your strongest suggestions in general to help face the ocean plastics crisis for our audience?
You want to go first, Doug, or you want me to go first?
Give it to you first, Chever.
Okay, I think for me, the challenge with this issue is you have to do everything and you have to do it all at once, right? So how do you do that, and where do you start? It can be very much overwhelming. But I think really what we're trying to do with Urban Ocean is really exemplary of how we're trying to approach this, which is We're trying to build broad-based coalitions of partners that bring different skill sets and different knowledge to this problem so that we can take a holistic look. One of the things we love about the Global Resilient Cities Network is that, you know, their attitude is all of these problems are interlinked, and you need to think about we care about marine debris, right? But we understand that for cities, their approach may be more about tourism or jobs or public health. And how do we link all these things together in truly holistic and resilient solutions? So that would be sort of my number one recommendation is broad-based coalitions and partnerships.
I would certainly echo everything that Chever just said, but I would also just add, it's about economics. Everything about this is about the economics of managing a city, a country, a region. Everything about plastics and marine debris impacts economics. And until we all begin to understand it in that way, it's going to be a very divisive issue. It absolutely is. It will impact your tourism. It'll impact your gross national product. It absolutely will cover every aspect of your country.
Many thanks to you both. We only have 2 minutes left, so I just want to thank you for being here this evening. It's a bit late here on the East Coast, so we're really happy we could put this together. And many thanks to the GRCN team and TCI team for all their help making this first session possible. A quick reminder, as you'll see in the chat, thank you, Nini. We'll have another presentation tomorrow with Dr. Chelsea Rockman, same time, so please join us. And I know there are a few of your questions that we were not able to get to. We will get the questions from GRCN and follow up with you directly on those. And we'll be following up with the recording as well as some additional information for you in the entire playbook early next week. So please stay tuned, and we look forward to engaging with you again in the future. Thank you all. Have a great night or morning, depending on where you are.